I want to tell you about the strangest thing an old man ever said to me. His name was Walter, 79. I met him at the return counter of a hardware store, and he had a grease stain on the knee of his khakis. Not a small one, a real commitment of a stain, right there for anyone to see. I did that thing you do, the polite glance and look away, and Walter caught it. He looked down at his own knee, looked back up at me, and said, and I quote, "Nobody's grading this, friend. The show closed years ago." Then he picked up his receipt, tucked a new furnace filter under his arm, and walked out. I stood there in line having what I can only describe as a small crisis. Because here's what he meant, and once you hear it, you genuinely can't unhear it. For most of our lives, we perform. There's a version of us we present to the world. The successful version, the busy version, the one with the nice car and the impressive title and the correct opinions on things. And we perform that version for an audience. The thing about that audience is, it doesn't exist. You've built a theater. You've been on that stage for decades, sweating under the lights, checking your reviews, and the seats have been empty the entire time. They always were. Retirees are the people who finally walked down off the stage, turned around, and actually looked. So today, 10 things they quietly stopped caring about, and every single one of them is a ticket to a show nobody ever bought. 1. Keeping pace with the neighbors. Let's start with the oldest scam going. The neighbors got a new patio. The neighbors just redid their kitchen with an island the size of a small boat. The neighbor's kid got into a school you've never heard of. And you feel that little stomach drop. Wait, am I behind? Here's what nobody tells you. The neighbors are usually broke. That patio's on a home equity line. That kitchen is a 5-year loan with a balloon payment nobody mentions at the barbecue. The neighbors aren't winning. They're leveraged. One bad year away from a very quiet, very tense conversation at their beautiful new island. People who've actually gotten somewhere financially tend to know this, because they've watched how these stories usually end. They watched a guy work until 67 to afford a boat he used 4 times total. They watched a couple with a genuinely gorgeous house have a genuinely miserable marriage inside it. Somewhere in your 50s or 60s, you stop looking at the patio and start looking at the man standing on it. And half the time, he doesn't look happy. He looks tired. The race was never real. You were sprinting on a treadmill next to a guy on a different treadmill, and both of you stayed exactly where you started. 2. Owning more of everything. Here's a joke the universe plays on you. You spend 30 years accumulating. The house, the furniture, the good dishes, a garage full of tools half bought for one specific project back in 2009. Boxes in the attic labeled MISC that have never been opened and never will be. And then, somewhere around 65, all of it starts to feel heavy. I've watched this happen. A man tries to give his son a solid oak dining set that cost real money back in 1996, and his son says, "Oh, thanks, but we're kind of doing the minimalist thing right now." You can watch 30 years of assumptions quietly collapse behind his eyes. Here's what he just learned. Stuff isn't wealth. Stuff is a job. Every object you own is asking something of you. Clean me, store me, insure me, move me. Explain to your kids why they should even want me. People who genuinely downsize almost always say the same sentence afterward. I don't know why we waited this long. And go use the good dishes tonight on an ordinary Tuesday with leftover takeout. The number one regret I hear is, we were saving it for a special occasion. The occasion never came. It was never going to come. You're the occasion. Eat the noodles off the wedding china. 3. Performing for an audience at work. There's a very specific kind of exhaustion that comes from performing competence for 8 hours a day. Sending the email at 9:40 p.m. so the timestamp does the bragging for you. Saying, let's take that offline in a meeting because you have nothing to add but need to be seen contributing something. Updating your title to something like Strategic Growth Partner when what you actually do is build spreadsheets. People who've actually stepped away from that grind are done with it, completely. Ask one what they used to do for a living and watch how fast they change the subject. Oh, I was in logistics. Anyway, have you tried these crackers? Costco. Unbelievable. That's the eulogy for a 30-year career that cost him his back, his weekends, and his daughter's middle school recital. I don't say that to be cruel. I say it because it should mildly terrify you. If the thing you're currently trading your Tuesday nights for is the thing you'll be casually mentioning at a barbecue in 15 years, right before moving on to crackers, it might be worth repricing that trade while you still can. Again, the audience you're performing for? Empty seats. 4. Chasing every last dollar. Careful here, because this isn't money doesn't matter. Money matters enormously. But there's a real difference between having enough and chasing every dollar, and people find that line the hard way, eventually. Here's what chasing every dollar looks like. Driving 15 minutes out of your way to save 6 cents a gallon. Spending an entire Saturday moving a savings account for an extra 0.2%. Taking the promotion you don't actually want in a city you don't actually like because it pays more. And the expensive one, the real one, is one more year. Just one more year. I'll retire after this one. The market's a little shaky right now. Let's do one more. The vesting date is 14 months out. Let's do one more. People who've watched enough of these stories play out have seen someone do one more year 3 or 4 times running, and then get a diagnosis. At some point you realize your life isn't a spreadsheet you're optimizing, it's a spreadsheet you're spending. And every extra dollar you chase gets paid for with something that doesn't come back. The genuinely wealthiest man I personally know turned down a lucrative consulting gig at 66. Someone asked him why. He said, "Because I already won, and I don't feel like playing another round." 5. Needing to win every argument. To be fair, a certain slice of the population has absolutely not learned this one and is currently typing in all caps under a local news station's comment section at 6:15 in the morning. But the ones who've actually figured it out are hands down the happiest people I know. Because at some point, it clicks. Arguing with a stranger online is like doing squats with an invisible barbell. Enormous effort, 0 result, and you look a little unwell doing it. The move they've mastered is this. They see something they violently disagree with, feel the heat rise in their chest, their thumb hovers over the reply button, and then they set the phone down and go look at a bird. That's the whole technique. The bird has no opinion on the news cycle. It's not just online either. It's family dinners too. The person who's stopped needing to win the holiday argument is the most powerful person at that table. Everyone else is arguing. He's over there having seconds. 6. Following every trend. Let me describe a guy to you. Cargo pants, 6 pockets, actively using 2 of them. The same pair of running shoes he's worn since a brand went out of style, got mocked relentlessly for a decade, and then somehow came back around to being cool again. Not that he noticed, because he never stopped wearing them. He simply stood still while the culture did a full lap and came back to shake his hand. That man is completely unbothered. He's not doing it ironically, and he's not unbothered in the performative way people say they're unbothered while clearly being extremely bothered. He genuinely, chemically, does not care. Because trends require you to care about the opinions of people you'll never meet, about a thing that'll be mildly embarrassing in 4 years anyway. That's the whole transaction. You rent relevance, monthly, forever. People who've actually settled into themselves cancel that subscription. Standing still, it turns out, is a strategy. And it's free. 7. Living on someone else's schedule. For decades, someone else owned your calendar. Meetings you didn't call. Deadlines you didn't set. That specific ritual of sitting in the parking lot for 10 extra minutes because you don't want to walk in early and make small talk with Gary from accounting. And then, one day, it's over. The regime falls, and a person emerges blinking into a world where the only thing scheduled for Tuesday is whatever they decide belongs on Tuesday. I'll admit the transition is rough for some. There's a 2-week stretch where people genuinely don't know what to do with their hands. They reorganize the garage. They alphabetize the spice rack. But it settles, and what you get on the other side is someone who says, "I'll swing by around noon," and shows up at 2:15 holding a bag of peaches from a farm stand he found on the way, with zero explanation and zero remorse. Here's my favorite detail, though. Most of these guys still wake up at 6 a.m., same as always. The difference is that nobody told them to. It was never really about doing less. It was about being the one who decides. 8. Staying busy to feel productive. Somewhere right now, a man is looking at a calendar that's completely full, wall to wall, color-coded, and feeling genuinely good about it. He's accomplished essentially nothing today, but he's booked. We've confused motion with progress so thoroughly that "How have you been?" now gets answered with "busy," and everyone nods like that's an achievement. It's not an achievement. It's a symptom. Breaking that habit is genuinely hard because busyness works like a drug, and the withdrawal is real. A lot of guys panic in the first month of real free time. They fill the day with errands that could have been one errand. They invent projects. And then something quietly shifts. They sit on the porch. They don't do anything. And they discover they haven't disappeared. That's the fear underneath all of it, isn't it? If I'm not producing something, am I still worth anything? It takes about 6 weeks and one very quiet Wednesday afternoon, but the answer turns out to be yes. A full calendar isn't a full life. Sometimes it's the exact opposite. The thing you use to avoid noticing the life you're not actually living. 9. Needing everyone to approve. At 35, you want everybody to like you. Your boss, your neighbor, the barista, whoever does your taxes, the woman at the DMV for reasons nobody can fully explain. Later on, there are maybe 5 or 6 people whose opinion genuinely lands. If you're not one of the 5 or 6, respectfully, you're furniture. That doesn't mean people get ruder with age. If anything, a lot of them get kinder. What actually happens is they finally separate 2 things we keep gluing together: kindness and approval seeking. Those aren't the same thing. One's a gift, the other's a tax. Watch someone who's made peace with his order at a restaurant. "I'll have the trout, no butter, and bring the salad out first." No apology tacked on the end, no nervous laugh to soften it. Meanwhile, plenty of us have eaten an entire meal containing something we're mildly allergic to because we didn't want to make a fuss. When that switch flips, you get real hours back every week. Hours you'd been quietly spending managing other people's feelings about your perfectly reasonable preferences. Saying no isn't cruelty. It's just accuracy. And the last one, the big one, the one everything else hangs off of. There's a version of financial life that looks like this: checking the portfolio 3 times a day, watching the red numbers, reading a headline with "plunge" in the title, written by someone half your age, blood pressure climbing, calling your advisor in a slight panic. That's not financial freedom. That's a second job with worse hours and no coworkers. Then there's the other version. And the other version is boring on purpose. Because boring is the entire point. It's having a couple years of spending money parked in cash and short-term holdings, so a bad market can't force a bad sale at the worst possible moment. It's having a withdrawal plan you actually trust, not one you're constantly second-guessing. It's owning boring, diversified index funds and genuinely never bringing it up at parties. So when the market drops 8 to 9% in a rough week, the reaction is basically, huh, and then they go water the tomatoes. That's the real flex. Not, I beat the market. Not, I called it. Just, huh. Then tomatoes. Because a portfolio you can actually ignore is worth more than one that merely performs. For one simple, unglamorous reason. It's the only kind you'll genuinely stick with through the parts that matter. And that same muscle ends up working on everything else too. The news cycle, the neighbors, what your adult kid decides to do with his life, whether it rains on Saturday. People who figured this out sort the whole world into two boxes, mine and not mine, and they only carry the first one around. So, back to Walter. Grease stain on the knee, furnace filter under his arm. Nobody's grading this friend. The show closed years ago. I used to think that line was a little bleak, honestly. Like he was saying, nobody cares about you. That's not what he meant, and it took me a long while to actually get it. What he meant was, you're free. The reviewers went home. The judges packed up years ago. The theater you've been performing in was built by you, staffed by you, and the audience whose approval you've been buying with your money, your Tuesday nights, and your one actual life was never really sitting in those seats to begin with. And here's the part that really gets me. You don't have to be retired to walk off that stage. Not one item on this list requires a pension, a certain birthday, or a 401k balance. You can drop every single one of them today for free. The good dishes are already in the cabinet. Go get them out. I'll see you in the next one.